Welcome back to the Racial Draft Podcast. It has been a long break, and I apologize for that. I am your host, Michael Ford. You probably need a little bit of reacquainting with what we do with the Racial Draft. Change the complexion, the comic book universe, one draft pick at a time. So, as it has been a few weeks, we concluded about a week ago. We concluded our 12th round of the season 7 regular season draft of the Racial Draft. And when we last spoke, it was round 7. So we've got 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, 5 rounds to make up in this extended pod. It'll probably be released in parts when you get it on your podcatchers. But if you're watching it live, hang out with me for a few hours because we're going to go through a bevy of picks. I don't know if I'm going to be joined by any guests, so it's going to be a lot of pregnant pauses and sips for water, like so, because your boy's got to stay a little bit hydrated. I may take a couple, liquor breaks in the middle just to keep myself lubed up with the devil's sugar. But anyway, let's just hop right into it. Like I said, we've got a lot of picks. Just going to give some sort of broad thoughts before we get into it, I suppose. What we do here with the Racial Draft, these different delegations, of which there are 10, draft their characters for the purposes of representing their culture, representing their race, representing their ethnic group, if you will. Some of these characters are being drafted to stay, sort of remain associated with these groups, and some are being drafted to be race bent. And typically what we do on the pod is we discuss how effectual those race bends might be, or just in general how important those characters could be to their respective cultures. We'll jump right in with the first pick of the 8th round, and that is Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke, from the Native American delegation. He was drafted a few weeks back. My own thoughts about this particular pick being what they are is I think that Deathstroke is, I think that he's a character that a lot of his personality is tied in with being a super soldier. Kind of, he's an older character. The character himself is older, and I think that there has been a tradition for Native Americans serving in the U.S. military, and potentially, there's some interesting places that you could take it with respect to his relationship to patriotism and kind of moving from being a super soldier to a mercenary for hire. Perhaps part of the decision to become a soldier for hire and mercenary assassin, if you will, has been, his status as a person of color, particularly as a Native American. I think that there are some avenues that could be explored with the character interpreted in that way. I mean, we have seen Deathstroke played by actors that are people of color, but they haven't gone as deep, perhaps, as they could go. The closest would be on the show Titans, where he was played by a Latino actor, Isai Morales. And I think there were tinges of that in his portrayal, but I think that there definitely, they could go a little deeper with it. My apologies. I do not at the moment have access to the Twitter poll, the approval poll for this character, but I will get right to it in a moment. Bear with me. Doing it live. You might hear that a lot. Hopefully not too much. However, Native American Deathstroke, 67% approval rating for Native American Deathstroke. And all 67% were strongly approved. And 17% were somewhat disapproved, and 17% racist. Well, that's an unfortunate start. I mean, 67 is still higher than 50%, but still a little lower than 75%. And, sometimes we like to, we like to aim higher with respect to our, we like to aim a little higher with respect to our polls, if possible. If a poll generates, if a poll does happen to generate, 75 or greater, that means that the audience has really taken to it. The reason I stall a little bit is because this next character kind of falls short of that threshold, and that would be Gwen Stacy from Earth 65, the alternate Gwen Stacy. You might know her as Spider Gwen. You might also know her as Ghost Spider. Hopefully not, because Ghost Spider is a terrible name. She was drafted by the Latinx delegation. I would imagine, I haven't heard anything through which the backstory could be reimagined. So I'm going to assume that her backstory is similar to that of her comic book counterpart and or her Spider-Verse counterpart. But be that as it may, aren't too many references in her character that are culturally specific. Obviously, there was a little bit of discourse last year around whether her story kind of ties into the trans experience. It does happen to be a Trans Visibility Day, so shout out to everyone who might be listening that is part of the trans community, and who are people that they support in their family and loved ones that are trans. We see you. I don't know. That feels weird. Feels weird to say, but anyway, Gwen Stacy, Spider Gwen. She definitely could be Latina, but I think that there are some, because she's been so traditionally associated with the 616 Gwen. I think that more germane to her story than her race is just the idea that this is the version of Gwen that was able to have more agency and not just be fridged the way that the original Gwen was. So for that reason, I'm not particularly shocked that this pick didn't really take hold and resonate with the listeners or the, followers, as it were. So 55.5% approval rating for Latina Spider Gwen, and that's 33.3 strongly approved, 22.2 somewhat approved, 33.3 somewhat disapprove, and 11.1% racist. We'll move on from Spider Gwen to, this one I'd like to clear out a little space for, because there's a lot of discussion that can be had around this character, and that is from the Black delegation. Shout out to Randy and some of the other people who have represented the Black delegation over the years. This is a character that there's been a lot of discourse around, and that is Max Eisenhart, also known as Eric Lashur, aka Magneto, and he was drafted by the Black delegation. Now, obviously, it's well known that Magneto has been traditionally associated with, particularly since the Bryan Singer movies, associated with being in the Holocaust and being a survivor of that genocide, and then being a character who has gone from being a victim, one of the victims of community within the community that was a victim of a genocide, rather, to borderline genocidal himself. That is a big part of his arc, that he kind of becomes the monster that he rose up to fight against. And that also being that because he was, a big part of the Nazi ideology is that of being the master race. And it's somewhat ironic that as a mutant supremacist, he too believes in the idea of the master race, just not the Aryan master race, but the mutant master race. All that is to say that while having Magneto be Black is an interesting wrinkle to the character, I don't know that it is as important to the long-term viability and long-term resonance historically and culturally that Jewish Magneto has. Now, of course, as I said before, there are black Jewish people. There have been black Jewish people, and I think that it wouldn't preclude us from having a black actor play Magneto if he were also Jewish. But I just don't think that in terms of for our racial draft purposes, him being primarily associated with the black experience, the black struggle, would be as additive as and as important to the character as his Judaism is, or as his experience as a Jewish person who survived the Holocaust. Um, not to get too political at the very moment, but a lot has been spoken about the role of Jewish people as survivors of genocide and what their moral responsibility is to prevent future genocides. So I think that given that, given that uh, moral scape that we're in right now, I think that it is still important to highlight that aspect of Magneto, as he straddles the line between hero and villain. So all that is to say that I'm a little dubious in terms of my own approval of the pick by the Black delegation. I understand why the pick was made. It's very provocative, but I don't know that it fully serves the character. So at this as it finished out in our polling, 50% approval rating for Black Magneto, 33.3 strongly approve, 16.7. I apologize for the noise. 16.7 somewhat approve, 33.3 somewhat disapprove, and 16.7 strongly disapprove of Black Magneto, or Magnegro, as we like to say. We'll move ahead from Black Magneto to the Jewish delegation, who I imagine were a little bit miffed that they missed out on Magneto this round. They drafted a character that, I would say that there's a lot in her character that benefited historically and currently from being Jewish. This would be Catherine Kitty Pryde, from the Jewish delegation, basically a defensive pick to remain Jewish. What is there to say? I mean, she's had a very interesting arc in the comic book world. Obviously, in live action, was portrayed by oh man, I'm sorry, I'm quickly drawing a blank on the actor. I'll come back to it. But yes, the actor was played. The character was played in live action in the Singer movies, but not necessarily. Oh, sorry, Elliot Page. I apologize. Elliot Page, nay Ellen, in their, or sorry, in his earlier stage. But yes, Kitty Pryde is a Jewish character that was kind of pit as the viewpoint character in the early 80s, more or less, when through the X-Men mythos, and but the avenue by which the debate of the struggle, the Xavier's vision and Magneto's vision of how mutants could best sort of interface with the baseline humans that were hated and feared them. Obviously, Kitty in her early days was very much wide-eyed and impressionable. She made some unfortunate choices along the way, as people have the panels to choose it, the panels to prove it. But I think that particularly in tandem with Magneto and Magneto's trying to impress upon her that his struggle need not be her struggle. I think that was one of the major storytelling benefits of Kitty Pryde as a young Jewish X-Man. And I think it sort of remains important. She's one of the few X-Men that, pardon the pun, has the pride, in her heritage, and is able to sort of play the, or not play the, but but occupy and embody the idea of intersectionality. I think we're starting to move into a territory, and something that Claremont had talked about, exploring Kitty's bisexuality as well. So I think that there are a lot of intersectional elements to Kitty, and one of those intersectional sectional elements is, in fact, um, her Jewishness. We seem to have again. I don't know if everyone can hear us. Randy,
I hope everybody can hear me because
I?
my internet, the way my internet is set up, I cannot guarantee I'll be on for the full time. But I did want to jump on after being away for so long. So,
Oh, sounds good. I mean, just reintroduce yourself to the people, Randy.
I am on Twitter. That's mostly where my presence is on social media. You may know me as Pietro Blacksomoff or any number of variations of names, but yeah, I mean, I've been with the racial draft for a few years, and I'm happy to be here.
So I got to ask. I mean, you're on Twitter. Does that mean that nudes are in bio? I mean, that seems to be the thing that's happening right now. And
I don't have the body for it, unfortunately. But
so
but
I'm not sure how much that you caught. Before I added you to the show, we were just talking about Magneto. From the Black delegation, that draft pick, you have an opportunity to, maybe speak a little bit more to defend it. We had just concluded a discussion, sort of a tandem discussion, with respect to Kitty Pryde, the pick that came right after it. And I was making the point that I think that her role, kind of as the conduit for that debate between Magneto and Professor X, in terms of what the proper posture, uh,
mhm,
if you will, of how mutants should interact with baseline humans. Her being Jewish, just like Magneto was Jewish, I thought was particularly beneficial to the storytelling in the early stages of the
mhm.
Claremont run. But since you did draft Black Magneto, I'd like to hear, and obviously the listeners would like to hear kind of what your thought process was behind Magneto as a Black man.
Well, on the surface, it's very easy to kind of sit there and be like, well, he's got a thing coming up. And so, but like, yeah, but at the same time, you can still sort of it would behoove you to sort of bear in mind that we have a history of how the civil rights era.
Uh oh.
Hear me?
Yep. Oh yeah. We lost like the last 10 seconds. So just after civil rights era.
Well, I just was going to say that there's a long history of solidarity between Black people and or Jewish people. Of course, obviously,
Mhm.
Jewish people can also be Black, but there's a long line of just sort of Jewish folks stepping forward to speak out on our behalf, and us also speaking out on their behalf. And so I feel like you don't take anything away or add anything unnecessary by making him a Black man. I feel like there's a lot that could be, added on to in a beneficial way that sort of is
Mhm.
like, I he's a man who has endured the horrors of the Holocaust, and then coming to America, seeing how Americans treat not only Jewish people but also Black people as well. So I feel like there's a lot of solidarity to be found there that
Mhm.
you wouldn't have to significantly, there wouldn't be some sort of like key missing element by making him Black.
That's a fair point. I mean, I suppose, this is something I'd said before, one of the true ironies of the Magneto character, because even though a lot of people are sympathetic to Magneto, I mean, I
Uh-huh.
do sort of see him more as villain slash anti-hero than, than a fully redeemed character, because
Yeah, he's definitely not. He still has that very that streak of righteous anger about him, and
yeah. Well, I would take it a step further. I think that it's very much kind of Shakespearean tragic that
Mhm.
he sort of become the thing that made him the monster that he in fighting the monster of supremacy. He became a supremacist himself. And I
Yeah.
think that's so important to fleshing out the character that as a black man, it's almost like there's a version of Magneto that's more righteous as just a black character, um,
Mhm.
whereas you know as a Jewish character that kind of came of age during the Holocaust, came of age, fighting Nazis. That when you listen to his rhetoric, it is very much Nazi coded. you know,
I
um,
mean, I feel like there is I will not sit here and say that I'm like well versed on the Claremont run. My knowledge of him is fairly recent. But that having been said, he does have this wrath about him that
mhm,
is very much, I could envision that black guy, that black
mhm,
politician out there, I could see that guy being like the super angry YouTuber that we're like hearing from or something like that. I could see that guy. So
mhm.
it is not difficult for me to sort of imagine him. Of course, obviously not, I'm a YouTuber, but still, like, just being kind of that outspoken personality that wants to sort of lash back out at the oppressor. And then when you sort of, on the surface, it's like, yes, it's about black liberation, but then the sort of details of what that entails is like, oh, so you want white supremacy chocolate coated is what you want.
I
Like,
mean, so
you
so
know
so so Hotep Magneto is what I'm
Right,
hearing.
right. That's exactly what it feels like. It feels like I could easily sort of feel like, yep, just put a black skin on it, and yep, that's Magneto.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like it's super easy to identify that with a lot of people that we've sort of seen in media and stuff like that, and whether aspiring or actually on in the mainstream. So
I mean, I feel like, this is obviously kind of beyond what we do here at the racial drafts, but I do think that there would be room for a character that was basically Magneto's son, who was
mhm,
black,
yeah.
who was just that fully, just like that was his character's arc, that
I
Magneto,
mean, for all intents and purposes, because they recently did a Magneto solo miniseries. That was essentially what they wanted that character to be. Irie, she was like, you know, has fiery base powers or whatever, and it was like Magneto sort of had himself reflected back in the mirror, and it's like, nope, too much, too much. So it was very interesting to see, and I'm like, that's sort of one of the long litany of things that I mourn about the loss of the Krakoa era is that characters like that, we will not be seeing them for the foreseeable future. So.
Well, look, not to too much open up your strategy, but I believe that Polaris is still out there, not drafted. So, I mean, to the extent that you really
Hmm.
want to go full, because again, Polaris's character, she's there's much more of an open canvas to what her character could be, and I
Yeah.
think that would be a very interesting spin on Polaris that and especially because Magneto didn't raise her,
Hmm.
having the same kind of magnetic powers and have her arc of what she endured growing up as a black woman and
Yeah.
having being a black woman with magnetic powers, like could really be an opportunity to flesh that dynamic out.
That is true. That is true.
but we'll keep going. We'll keep going. We're still, just a few picks in. This is another defensive pick. This is from the East Southeast Asian delegation, and Emiko Queen, aka Red Arrow, was drafted. Do you have a lot of exposure to this character, Randy?
A bit here and there. I read the Teen Titans run with her in it, and then the thing with her adventure with Stargirl recently.
Okay, so you haven't read her arc in the Green Arrow
Nope,
mythos.
not
Okay.
yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's Green Arrow's a little weird, just kind of like because they're very, and this is kind of tied into some of the other picks that the East Asian delegation have made. A lot of his mythos is Asian coded, um,
Hmm.
although Oliver himself is not. you know
Right.
so one of the many situations where his father has had dalliances in Asia. The
Hmm.
product of one of those dalliances is his obviously half sister, but sister, Emiko Queen, who's Japanese and started out, of course, as a villain who wanted to kill him, but as you do when you find out that your father's a colonizer. But eventually was brought into the fray and is now part. I mean, they've done I think underrated about DC right now is they've been putting a lot of energy into expanding out the various families.
Hmm.
Oh, like every hero kind of has a version of their Bat family,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Emiko is part of the Arrow family. I
yeah.
recommend those books. The books are good.
Yeah, because for a good long little minute in the I guess early 2000s, and especially like around the New 52 era, they acted like they were ashamed of their expanded families, especially characters that came out in like the yeah. But yeah, they're doing better now, and I'm very happy
Yeah.
about that. So,
Well, I think a big part of it, and we've talked about this before, is that having the city is really important. Like we
mhm,
kind of know what Gotham is and what Gotham is all about.
yeah,
It's kind of like a thinly veiled pastiche of like New York and some of the other East Coast kind of industrial cities.
mhm,
Whereas Star City, they over the last few years, especially under the Percy run, they really kind of helped to reimagine Star City as as basically Seattle. And being a West Coast city kind of means that there's a more substantial Asian community. That
mm,
Asian communities plural than kind of what you get on the East Coast. Not to say there aren't Asian communities on the East Coast, but they tend to be not as kind of well integrated into the city's mainstream. And I think
okay,
that's sort of helped. I think that's sort of helped to kind of bridge that gap of all of the sort of Asian influences in the Arrow mythos. And there's still a lot more work to be done, but I think that that's given uh, these characters a better sense of place and a better
mhm,
way of distinguishing them of just kind of like it's a lesser version of the Bat family.
right, yeah,
To that end, I think that this season in particular, the East Southeast Asian delegation has leaned into, they've got Oliver Queen, they've got Roy, and they have Emiko, as representatives of the East Southeast Asian delegation. So I think that they've really helped to, re, you know, make that coding something that is, canon, so to speak.
I mean, this is definitely the time to do it because like you get an ongoing title like that, and as I attempted to do, it feels pretty good when you get like a whole comic that's just like points for me. Like it's just it's just when I saw that the resurrection of Magneto was going to happen, I was like, that whole book is just nothing but my points. Thank you. So
Now
for them.
I have to be honest. I have not been reading that book. I know Storm plays a major role in the book. Sort of, give sort of like the quick rundown for the readers, or sorry, the listeners, as to why they should pick up the book?
I mean, it is so, it's so intense. And yes, of course you get, like, the feats. We know that fans of certain characters are like what I call quote unquote feet fetishists, because they're like always looking out.
I'm gonna steal that. I am gonna steal that because that is gold, my friend.
They're always looking out for like the new sort of fantastical thing that the character does, and all that's great and lovely. And obviously there's an abundance of them. Al Ewing, like, he loves on Storm and loves on Magneto, but uh, sort of a quick little Cliff Notes version is, um, Storm visits Adam Brashear,
Nice, love like
and right, exactly. She visits Adam Brashear, calls on his help with, basically accessing, using her a combination of her powers and his science to access, the the afterlife, sort of like, some iteration of the afterlife. In doing so, she comes into contact with this sort of Virgil, Dante's Inferno-esque sort of, metaphysical and abstract manifestations that take you through all of, you know sort of Storm's perceptions of herself and Magneto's sins. She's confronted with a lot of these sort of things, and she's like battling dominions and going up against these, it's amazing. It's really amazing. And normally I'm a person who, I don't have a super long attention span for, like, when you get um a whole lot of text and stuff like that. Like, I kind of sort of, my eyes gloss over a little bit. But
Mhm.
every bit of the storytelling, whether it's the dialogue is very like soliloquy, like very monologue, that is so just like, the writing and the art just poured everything into it. It is so dynamic and so amazing. You could have taken it like as its own thing almost. You don't even have to necessarily have the sort of background as an X-Men reader, and you can still feel like, oh, okay, this is very impressive work. So I absolutely recommend it to anybody who's sort of on the fence about whether or not they'll give it a try.
Okay. So, yeah, so that's the quick pitch for Resurrection of Magneto. But let's go on to the next pick. We're not going to spend too much time on this pick because I don't think there's a lot to say, and that's Gambit. We stand a Cajun king, so to speak. He's been, I think that there's room for multiracial gambit as long as he, sort of maintains his accentry and his Cajun vibes. I think that there's probably enough ethnic mixing that going on in that particular part of Louisiana that wouldn't be too hard to imagine a gambit that's a little bit on the browner side, especially when you add in the fact that he was. My understanding is he was an orphan.
Mhm.
So just that aspect, you know, him being not really knowing who his parents are, but being raised in that culture, um, sort of provides the explanation for why he could still, maybe not physically resemble um, what we would classically think of as Caucasian.
Yeah.
Um, oh, I should have mentioned. My apologies. The approval, the approval ratings for the last for the last pick and for this pick. I've noticed that the approval ratings for this season have been a little lower than past seasons. It's been a little bit more disappointing. Maybe because folks haven't been.
I I I blame the Twitters. Things have gotten kind of spiteful over on the Twitters.
That's true. I also think that because there haven't been as many folks coming on the podcast to explain the picks.
Yeah,
Maybe people
yeah.
are just going with their first first inclinations more often. But Emiko Queen, 87.5% approval. 75 strongly approve, 12.5 somewhat approve, and 12.5 somewhat disapprove. That 12.5 I'm side eyeing, because
Right, because
um,
who else is she supposed to be?
exactly. Well, technically, I guess she's multiracial because, but yeah, multiracial Gambit, 50-50. 33.3 strongly approve, 16.7 somewhat approve, and 50% somewhat disapprove.
I
Multiracial Gambit.
mean, he's multiracial, black dad, white mom, half and half, 50-50. I can dig it. Because part of me feels like half of those people are like not even really mad about making him biracial. It's just the fact that they just don't like Gambit. Like if you go, if, but like if I'm like that's only like 50% shade, because if you go on Twitter, you'll see that a lot of folks like have this complaint of him just not being written well, like with much substance. And I say that as being my own, I am a Gambit fan and I like Gambit,
Mhm.
and he's a character I enjoy. But a lot of people are like, oh, he's stuck in this sort of old idea of what guys thought was macho or thought was like whatever. And I'm like, it
Are we
works.
sure he was written? Are we sure he was written for the guys?
But yeah, honestly, it doesn't come across to me as I don't know. I feel like a lot of people write off his flamboyance or write off his sort of like the way he was written. The only time I really genuinely have a complaint about the way that Gambit is written is ironically when Chris Claremont writes him. Like that's the only time I genuinely feel like, he falls flat. But anytime other than that, I feel like he's pretty fun, and characters writers know how to have fun with him as this sort of like himbo adjacent sort of character that he's very fun and very funny, even if sometimes his personality might feel kind of one note to the situation. It's still he's still a good time whenever he's there.
See, I kind of like. I mean, I will admit that in the early days of Gambit, I felt like he was a little bit too market tested.
Yeah.
It felt like someone like ticked off all the boxes of like what we
Hmm.
wanted out of our cool '90s character.
Yeah.
But that wasn't necessarily a reason to hate him. It was as much of as a reason to side eye him as kind of like a marketing scheme in
Yeah.
search of a storyline.
Yeah.
They deliberately made him a cipher, because they had that whole, there was a big storyline in the '90s around when Bishop showed up, that one
Hmm.
of the X-Men would betray the X-Men, and Gambit was one of the high end candidates because we didn't
Yeah.
know a lot about Gambit's past,
Right.
and him already being somewhat of a untrustworthy character as a thief and as a bit of a rogue and a ruffian. I think that they really leaned in on that whole like dangerous romantic stranger bit, but then
Hmm.
they also had that great storyline of like the romance between him and Rogue, and him not being able to, the him being able to seduce everyone, but the one woman that he actually wanted,
Yeah.
couldn't touch. That's very romance novelty, and I think it's gone a long way to his enduring popularity among the female fans. That if you got into X-Men as a teenager, that's pretty much catnip for you, the Rogue Gambit romance. Um, but I mean, now obviously they're married. They figured that little problem out. They can be together. So it's it's a little tougher because it's harder to see him as a full-on solo character now,
Hmm.
um, as much as them as a pair. Rogue and Gambit, you kind of can't have one without the other. I think it's going to be interesting to see how his storyline plays out in live action whenever he's introduced to the in the MCU.
Hmm.
I do think they're doing a great job of rekindling that emotion on the X-Men '97 cartoon.
Yeah. And
So
frankly, I feel like I'm trying to think. I believe it was Kelly Thompson who wrote it.
I
Well,
think so.
whoever it was did a very good job with Mr. and Mrs. X. I thought that was very well done, and it's like it
Right,
gives the dynamic of they're still kind of flirtatious toward each other, even though they're a married couple. Like it didn't evolve, it didn't devolve into like Marge and Homer, right? So it
right,
was
right.
like they still have that fire to them, and now you're able to also see them sort of work through past sort of conflicts or past sort of snags in their relationship. And you see them again later with Rogue and Gambit, the recent title, that they were like, yes, we love each other, but we clearly don't see how to address so and so situation. And then on top of that, you throw in the fact that like Mystique and Destiny freaking hate Gambit. They just like hate him with a flaming passion. And so you get that sort of that funny dynamic of like just they work so well bouncing off of each other. They really do. And as long as somebody like remembers to do that and doesn't like sort of manufacture something that um causes them to sort of have this rift or whatever. But I mean, Gambit as a solo character, I feel like the only thing that really keeps him from having um sort of solo potential is the fact that people keep going back to the same theme of like anytime he goes back to solo, oh, here comes the Thieves Guild. Oh boy, what are they up to? Like we we get it. He's a thief. He's part of the guild. That's not all that he has. And I feel like the storytelling is stuck in the past, and that's
Mhm,
sort of what gives you the impression that Gambit himself, he's had a lot of development since then.
mhm.
And it's up to them as the editorial office to sort of realize that and accept it and move on.
Interesting. I mean, I don't mind that he's got that past of being a thief and
Hmm.
a grifter. Like I like my characters, having a little bit of dirt on them a lot of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But I just don't find the Thieves Guild themselves compelling.
Right,
Um,
exactly. They're not.
yeah,
They've had like we got the substance of them way back in the 90s, and that's all fine and dandy. That's very fancy, but they only really are compelling in as much as they inform Gambit. Like I
so
would
wait,
never.
isn't Black Cat in the Thieves Guild, or
She's
am I making
she's in a different faction of the Thieves Guild.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
So like
mean,
I could not imagine, based on my current understanding of the Thieves Guild, like if they were to be like, yeah, tomorrow we're dropping a comic of the Thieves Guild. Like I no, I wouldn't read that. We've
I
already kind of.
actually see. I'm the opposite. I would read it because of the hope that whoever got that book approved, like, actually had a way to make the Thieves Guild compelling.
I will qualify that I would read it if Jed McKay wrote it. I put it that way. Cause
Yes,
cause
yes.
he's the one that added so much of the sort of fire, like the sort of seductive allure of being a thief and kind of living that life and stuff. It felt far less artificial when he wrote it. It wasn't like he had to try to push you to feel that way. It's like, okay, by the sort of teasing out of the concept, oh, this is like, it's kind of spicy. You kind of up to like trying to figure out what they're up to. And like, I mean, Felicia Hardy and Odessa, what's her name? It's like, it's very interesting that the way that he did it. So again, if it was Gambit, like, sure, but I would have to sort of get that same elaboration on Gambit that I got for Felicia Hardy.
Yeah, like my pitch, not that everyone wants to hear my all of my pitches, but like my pitch for a Gambit solo movie is essentially like an Ocean 11 style movie where he has to do like one big heist. and and Rogue is on the other side of the heist. Like he can't let
Mm.
her know that he's gotta, steal from whoever it is that she's affiliated with. Like that would be my like single heist Gambit stories. Would be more interesting than exploring all the nuances of the Thieves Guild.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like yeah, Gambit is it's not the thieving that gets old. It's not the romancing that gets old. Because honestly, I'm here for all of it. Like I'm hearing you say like the sort of intrigue of it all was like popular with teens, and I was like, yep, I am teens. Because I'm here for all of it. But I mean, I wish that that he would get one of these current writers, because I feel like this current slew of writers is like they are really on it. They're really good about
Mhm.
it, and I think somebody in this current slate, they could do it. They really could.
All right. So we'll move on from one character that is, kind of wanting a renaissance with a really good writer to one that actually got that renaissance in Christopher Smith, aka Peacemaker.
Hmm.
You know, I think that this is a character that nobody heard of a few years back, or no, I would say nobody, but not a lot of people heard of this guy. He came deep in the crates of the DC universe, and good old James Gunn put him in a Suicide Squad movie, cast John Cena to play him, and both of the writer and the performer made the character pop, and then he got a solo an HBO Max series that also popped. And wouldn't you know it, they've got I wouldn't call him an A tier. I wouldn't call him an A tier hero, but he's in the passing realm on your report card. More a lot of people know about Peacemaker, and a lot of people care about
Hmm.
Peacemaker. I basically look at him as Amanda Waller's physical avatar. you know,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
she's doing the planning, he's following the orders. I don't know. Did you read the Peacemaker Tries Hard miniseries?
I was gonna save Peacemaker for a binge read, but
Okay.
I definitely have noticed the uptick in his presence in the comics, and it's like when I talk about, I mean, we've talked about it on Twitter, just the sort of the trifecta, or like the sort of top tier way in which you push comics characters, is sadly it's not through the comics, it's from movies, and it's from games. Like, yes,
Mhm.
TV also helps. Yes, comics also help. Obviously, comic appearances also help. But largely, it's movies and games. And Peacemaker has gotten both. He showed up in one movie, and it is now a permanent part of a really super popular game. If I'm not mistaken, is was it just Mortal Kombat, or was it another game he was added to as well?
I know it was Mortal Kombat. Was he also added to Fortnite, or am
I
I
I
making
I
that up?
think I don't recall for sure, but I'm like, okay, so you're in at least one super incredibly popular gaming.
Not to mention the series too. So
Right,
the
right, right.
series was important in fleshing him out. Kind of making him more likable and
Yes,
having
yes.
people understand his motivations and what makes him tick.
Right. And those things are far more accessible, legally accessible anyway, than the comics. So, you he's gotten a really interesting push, a sort of unexpected push, honestly, but a really interesting push. And I feel like
Oh, we lost you
so
again. So come on back. You feel like
oh, I just was saying that he's um it seems clear that he's gonna get a good long push, like he's
yeah,
gonna be here for a while. So
yeah. Tying that into where we are with the racial draft, this is a character that works really well as a white guy, exceedingly well as a white guy because of the fact that he's a little bit on the mediocre side. He's not what you would call excellent. And the fact that his dad is a white supremacist
Hmm.
kind of has the benefit to him as well. He's not a Nazi like his dad. He's
I mean, look, it
he's
it it gives that, yes, also of course he's not a Nazi like his dad, but at the same time, he still gets to have sort of um that sort of edge lord
yeah,
humor about him. He still gets to have sort of the inappropriate, politically incorrect sort of way of delivering himself. That's
right.
like you would expect that from a conservative, but he's trying to do better, but he still is like,
It's
it
it's
is.
it's it's the classic. Well, he really doesn't know any better.
Right, right, exactly. So he gets to, and that sort of is the intersection of also making, like I was saying on Twitter, like he's our bisexual murder himbo. Like he's that, because he's very inappropriate in how he talks about people, how he talks about like black and brown. He's very inappropriate, but he's trying to do better. But also he wants to bring about peace by murdering people. So like he is just very interesting how they sort of found their perfect little place for Peacemaker, and it is sort of ingenious how they managed to work it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how in around the same time frame, we had Peacemaker and we had John Walker
Mhm.
introduced in live action, and I think that they're really of a piece with one another.
What
But
one of them is flirting and the other is harassment. Yes.
but again, I think that if John Cena played John Walker, he would bring the same qualities to the performance that would kind of soften his
I,
soften
I
it.
think that's fair. That's fair.
But all that is to say, big coup for the white delegation. It's really hard, when you're making these defensive picks to have a character that actually does feel like he's enhanced by whiteness. And
Hmm.
that, I would give the nod to Peacemaker in that respect. However, I'm looking at the approval polls here. For some reason, it's not coming up. I may have to open up my phone. Oh, there it is. There it is. Surprisingly, only 66.7% approval rating for Still White Peacemaker. 50% strongly approved, 16.7 somewhat approved, and 33.3 somewhat disapprove. But like you said, maybe that's more of an indictment of the people not liking the Peacemaker character than
Yeah.
just the idea of Peacemaker remaining white. Because honestly, it'd be really hard for me to imagine Peacemaker as any other race.
Yeah, that's I couldn't even make the case for him to be black. Like his
No, no,
his father his father was Uncle Ruckus, I guess. Like I don't know.
no. It'd be really hard to like that. Like that character would have to be a full-on villain. Black Peacemaker is like, yeah, that's just Coonmaker. Um, Moving on from one character that's hard to imagine not being white to a character that's a little easier to imagine not being white, to be honest, and that's Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin.
Yeah.
Obviously, he is a rich man, but he's also a man that struggles with mental illness and doesn't seek therapy. So I feel like that's
That's
he's kind
somebody I
of
know.
he's a man of color who has a lot of money and is a menace. and passed on being a menace to his child. Are we sure? And he's got waves. However, he was not drafted by the black delegation or even the multiracial delegation. He was drafted by the Swanamena delegation, which probably was a points play, if we're being honest. Because they don't have waves like that. They don't have waves like that. But yeah, 80% approval rating for Swan and Norman Osborn, 60% strongly approve, 20% somewhat approve, and 20% strongly disapprove. So pretty good showing. That's the character. I mean, he knows no he needs no real introduction. We all
Yeah.
know the Green Goblin. If you're a Spider-Man fan, you know the thing, you know the deal. But like I said, I do think that he could benefit from being, if not Swana, or some kind of man of color in whatever new incarnation we get. We're gonna get him as a black man in what was it, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. We lost Randy for a bit. Maybe he'll be back, but yeah, we'll move on until Randy can join us again. From Norman Osborn to Charles Xavier. Randy, are you back?
I accidentally kicked myself out. Yes, I'm back.
All right. So yes, from Norman Osborn to Charles Xavier, Professor X, the from the Polynesian delegation. Obviously, we've talked about this before in other seasons about the idea of Professor X. If not a white man, he can be a person of color, but he still needs to be on that respectability politics train.
Hmm.
That's his jam. That is his
Yeah.
jam. You know, hopefully they
I
will
mean,
accept us.
the fact that so many black and brown folks have internalized the respectability politics is like, yep, that makes a pretty compelling case that he's very versatile in where his background can fall.
Yeah, and I know that it's become popular to think of Professor X as a villain. I don't. I think of him as someone who is sort of the supreme pragmatist, and on a certain level, honorable. His power being what it is, he both
Hmm.
has the ability to sense all the bigotry in the world,
Hmm.
and he also has the power to remove that bigotry. But
Yeah.
if he were to do that, he would take away their agency and their free will, and that would
Yeah.
make him villainous. So what he's trying to do is change minds without literally changing minds,
Right.
or change hearts rather than change minds. And I think that if you look at Professor X, through that lens, it kind of gives him a little bit more of a heroism. um, what he's struggling with is a lot deeper than what a lot of other people that are trying to lead are struggling with.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair because it's very easy to look at sort of the result of his actions without sort of giving the grace of what exactly does telepathy feel like, you
Yeah,
know,
we lost him for
verifiable. Right.
yeah.
I'm going to just say it like that. We don't have scientifically verifiable
Mhm.
uh, 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 proof of telepathy existing as a real thing, but we can sort of imagine being able to. I don't know. We can only sort of have that limited idea of what it would be like,
Right.
as opposed to somebody who would, you know, I'm assuming in the early parts of his development, he would have had no control of his powers, and so he was constantly being inundated with these ugly ideas, and about mutants, but also about probably people of color, about women, about LGBT people, like just whatever, whoever was different. He's constantly hearing people's perceptions and has to sort of parse through what of those allegations are true and what is not true, what is just
Right.
somebody being a
and
jerk. So like it's very
and it's kind of
difficult.
interesting,
Yeah, go ahead.
obviously, we living in cynical times,
Uh-huh.
we see a character like that, we would think, well, that character is obviously going to be a villain because they're
Yeah.
seeing the darkness in all of us, you
Yeah.
know but the idea that someone can see the darkness in all of us and still believe that we can do and be better,
and
you know
cling to it so dearly as he does. Like he's
right.
very, very passionately holds on to that.
Exactly. So, I think that perhaps, I think that when he's portrayed as a pure white man, I think it's a little bit more naive than even when it's a person of color,
Yeah.
um, because yeah, maybe he, as a white man, hasn't really heard the worst of it about himself, about his own people. I mean,
Yeah.
he's heard about mutants, but he hasn't heard about black people or
Yeah.
Asian people. Um,
Yeah.
so when you give him a little bit of a little smattering of melanin, I think it makes the character even more powerful.
Yeah. It makes that empathy that much deeper. Yeah.
Right. Um, and yeah, so approval rating wise, got to do the math on the fly here. So our 71.5% approval rating, 42.9 strongly approve, 28.6 somewhat approve, 14.3 somewhat disapprove, and 14.3% racist. And that's Polynesian Professor X. Uh, this is a good appropriate pick for we've been staying in the realm of the X, and since X-Men '97 has been kicking around, who better than the South Asian delegation's drafting of Morph? um, I will imagine that your exposure to Morph came through the comic, I'm sorry, the cartoon, like mine did. Is that correct, or did you read him in Exiles?
Um, I did read Exiles, but like my reading of like his character was sort of out of order. So like before I only just recently binge watched the full X-Men the animated series. Like I had seen
Okay.
episode as a kid, but I never seen every episode. So I started off with reading the comics, which was Generation X, the recent Generation X run, and they gave us a character that was called Morph. And then after that, I read Exiles, which was like, oh, this is Morph, like the one
Mhm.
that people really kind of know and are more familiar with. And then I saw the show, so I was like, okay, well, different versions of the character, and I feel like, yeah, they clearly leaned into the one that's more familiar from Exiles. So,
Yeah. I mean, I gotta be honest. I didn't care for Morph during the first run of the cartoon of the
mhm.
animated
Yeah,
series.
yeah, yeah,
I thought that the character was sort of put out there to be one of an original character that they could kill off, so as to not kill off one of our mainstay characters, and I
yeah.
appreciated that much. I appreciated that. But then when they brought him back, with a grudge, I was like, man, you don't even go here. I was like,
Yeah. He,
I'm
he
like,
kept
don't.
he kept coming back as like a sort of a foil, and then you kind of feel sorry for him, but he wasn't around long enough for you to really actually develop any emotional attachment to him. So it's like, okay, are you gonna stay this time? Are you gonna get your little intro sequence too, or no? We're okay. Well, I guess bye. See you till next
And then
time.
the fact that his powers were basically Mystique's powers, but like
Hmm.
Mystique was a much more, and continues to be a much more interesting and layered character. It was
Yes.
just kind of like, yeah, can we get more Morph up out of here so we can get Mystique in there?
Yeah, I
But
mean, basically, and it was like because basically what I was expecting or hoping for when I was actually watching the animated series, I was like, okay, so are we gonna ever get into why Mystique is working for Apocalypse, or and they just kind of never went that direction,
exactly.
and but we just kept getting more. So yeah, that
Right.
was
Just reimagine all of those episodes of the original X-Men animated series where Morph has actually been Mystique the whole time.
right. Yeah, and it's like it's not that I hate Morph. It's just that he was superfluous.
Yeah.
So
But I, we're keeping our fingers crossed for what their plan is for this version of Morph. I don't know. I mean, if you've listened to this podcast, you probably know, but if you don't, Morph is going to be uh, introduced or come out as non-binary. As of now, Morph is still using he, he him pronouns, but at some point, I imagine that Morph will use they them pronouns, and perhaps this means that we'll see Morph in other incarnations. Back in the 616 comic universe. But if not, then Morph can live and prosper in the animated universe as represent one of the, I think the first outwardly queer character in that in the animated universe, right? Am I
Um,
forgetting
as
something?
as far as I'm aware, I think the first, yeah. Cause
Yeah.
cause
So
the previous animated series, they never introduced Destiny. So we never had any sort of tie between Mystique and Destiny at all. Um they yeah, yep, yep, I think it's first.
yeah, so that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Cool distinction for the character. So yeah, big things could potentially portend for Morph, and the South Asian delegation got it on the ground floor of that. With Morph being such a blank slate, why couldn't Morph be South Asian? With the shape shifting ability, Morph could be any race, honestly.
Hmm.
Even the fact that Morph so often uh, depicts, this is something that's going to be covered, I'm sure. The fact that Morph is so often depicted as a white man, that could just be Morph's mutant ability saying, oh well, this is what you want. This is the version of myself that allows me to move through with the least amount of struggle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to that end, from an approval perspective, 83.4% approval rating for South Asian Morph. 66.7 strongly approve, 16.7 somewhat approve, and 16.7 somewhat disapprove of South Asian Morph. So good on the South Asian delegation for making another strong pick. So that was the eighth round of the racial draft. We'll try to pick things up a little bit, go a little faster, so we can get through these rounds and not be here all night. South Asian delegation came back around in the ninth round with Kurt Wagner, um, Nightcrawler. This one's a little bit harder of a stretch, right? Because I don't know a lot about the whether there are not only South Asians in Germany but South Asian Christians, Catholics, if you even in Germany. Um, Obviously, those are really important aspects of Nightcrawler's character, both being German and being Catholic, particularly because of him looking like a demon. But assuming that they can square that circle, um, I suppose I don't have much of a disapproval of the pick. But what about you?
That definitely feels like an adoption story. Like I can't like I really can't I can't I mean it's Mystique obviously is the parent of so but I there's a lot there to consider, so yeah.
I feel you there. So 66.7% approval rating for South Asian Nightcrawler. That's 55.6 strongly approve, 11.1 somewhat approve, 22.2 somewhat disapprove, and 11.1% racist. Moving past Crawler to Clea Strange. Clea Strange, from the Polynesian delegation. Really, that's a character that, obviously traditionally depicted as white, but doesn't have to be. mean,
Clea is of the Faultine. That can translate to anything in terms of human appearance. So
correct, correct. And we covered this earlier, but Stephen Strange in this season was drafted by the Polynesian delegation. So, we got Polynesian human, Polynesian Faultine. The Stranges. Have you been keeping up with the Strange book?
I have, yes, yes.
So, how do you like the idea of Stephen and Clea as kind of your married sorcerers supreme.
I mean, it is certainly something that you don't see every day. You get sort of this idea that a magical character, um at least over on Marvel side, I can't really speak elsewhere, but that they sort of are like so powerful and so burdened that they sort of feel like it's unfair to be in love with anyone else, almost like you don't really get to see like when I'm trying to think back if it was Scarlet Witch. I think she may have had a relationship with I don't think her relationship with Jericho Drum featured in her solo thing. But that's sort of my point. I can't really imagine or remember a time when you see a magical character who is actually featured prominently. Like, you get to see like a Glamour and Illusion or something like that. They're little side characters that nobody really cares about. But
Mm-hmm.
when you see like a Doctor Voodoo, or you see a Doctor Strange or a Scarlet Witch, you don't really see them in relationships. They're sort of above and
Or not to cut you off since we lost you for a second, but typically we see the dysfunction in their relationship more so
yeah,
than them in a
yeah,
functional relationship.
right, exactly. That's sort of hate that I got cut off there, but that was my the point that I was driving at. That basically you see them more as like they're sort of burdened and they just don't really have time for that. So
Mm-hmm.
to see them be happily in a relationship, even when they're disagreeing, they still are like kind of respectful and cordial about it, and um unafraid to sort of voice, I don't think you're approaching that the right way, or maybe that was out of line. You should have done da 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 instead. And
Mm-hmm.
so it feels like an actual relationship, not just one sort of serving the ends of the other, plot wise. It
Well,
works. It works really well.
that's good to hear. I mean, contrary to popular belief in some of other contexts, I do like when characters evolve. I just think that some characters, you know, can evolve past the point where they're the same things that appeal to the
Mhm.
character would be present. But I feel
Yeah.
like in the case of Strange, he's been through so many ups and downs that this idea of the Stranges together, and Clea was out of the picture for so long, uh,
Yes.
that her coming back full force and her being elevated to this level of like on par with Doctor Strange. It feels organic, it feels earned, and it
Right,
feels
right.
like
That's what I feel. That's what I feel like is so satisfying about it, because when they initially had a relationship, it was almost like the college teacher having a dalliance with the TA,
Mhm.
the college professor having this sort of inappropriate relationship with one of
And
his
let's face
students.
it, that's Stephen Strange coded as fuck right there.
and and like, they ended up getting married, but she was sort of like, I don't know, it was very much like she was sort of doting on him, and like
Mhm.
they just didn't write her in a way, Clea, such a way that she really was
An equal.
right. and
Yeah.
and not, not even necessarily just status wise, but also kind of in terms of like her maturity and her
Mhm.
ability to sort of make the quote unquote tough decisions or whatever. And so now you see her come back and she's like, I am of the Faultine. I am a warlord. I am, the sorceress supreme of the dark dimension. And like she has the sort of the all of these traits that we normally ascribe to how Doctor Strange would, sort of carry himself. And she does much the same, with her own flavor to it. And it works super well. It really, really does. Because yes, she's learned from him, but she's not like a carbon copy of how he does things.
Right. So to that end, 66.6% approval rating for Polynesian Clea. Very 33.3 strongly approved, 33 somewhat approve, 22.2 somewhat disapprove, and 11.1% racist. Um, moving from this one, we can maybe get into it. The Swanamania delegation, Dreamer. I know you've been a big Dreamer reader. Um, Tell us why that could or couldn't work. Swana Dreamer.
Well, the simple fact is we start off with the observation that today is both Easter Sunday and also is the Trans Day of Visibility. So
Mm.
happy celebrating to all who observe either and or both of said observances. So that having been said, Neonal is she is Naltorian, she's an alien from the planet Naltor, and it is very, very much a part of her as a character that she's trying to discover sort of how to make use of her abilities and how to best use her abilities to thwart these impending disasters and all of that. I feel like you could look. I'm trying to think of how exactly to articulate it.
Mm-hmm.
Is her story is very much about not denying but embracing who she is,
Mm-hmm.
embracing the power of who she is as a person. When all the world is looking at her from the outside and feeling as if she is less than, she's not good enough. Her sister tries to deny her womanhood because she's transgender. It is very much there's so much there that you could also reflect on being a woman of color too.
Mm-hmm.
And like you may look at me from the outside and who I am biologically, what I look like may not fit into your mold of what is acceptable or what is worth exploring or what is worth um celebrating. But I'm still worthy and I still deserve to exist. And
Yeah.
and not only do I deserve to exist, but I have every bit as much to contribute to society as you do. And in
Mm-hmm.
some cases more so. So yeah, I feel like that's the fact that she has been selected. I almost feel like it doesn't even matter what delegation. She
Yeah.
she has this comic that's coming out. Uh, Dream Team for Suicide
Mm-hmm.
Squad, and also her solo graphic novel is either it's coming out or it's already been released. I believe it may have been just recently released. Bad Dream,
Yeah. Yeah, the
and
one thing that the only thing
so,
that would be kind of a little bit give pause and pushback is that
mhm,
we know that it was Nicole Maines who gave so much of herself into her performance of the character on
yeah,
Supergirl,
that's fair.
and it does seem that she's played a big role creatively
Hmm.
in writing the character and kind of bringing her into the main universe,
Yeah.
the main canon of DC. I mean, I had hoped because I wasn't sure that Nicole Maines might be a woman of color herself, but it turns out that she's not. That she's a white woman. Um, but you know, I would hope that uh, she wouldn't have an issue with her character being reimagined in that way. I don't think it doesn't. I don't think it's any kind of disrespect to the character, like you said, for
Yeah.
those reasons. But obviously, out of it being such a new character that is getting so much kind of real time input
Hmm.
from one creative would be the own would justify what I'm about to say, which is looking at the approval rating for this draft pick at one of the lower 33.3 approval
Good
with
God.
33 strongly approve, and 66 disapproving of the pick. So I don't know how much of that is about the idea that there's a very particular vision of who.
How much of it is misogyny? How much of it is transphobia? How much of it is Islamophobia? Like there's a whole smorgasbord of ugliness to pick from. Hopefully, it's just about the character.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at it through the most good faith lens that you
right
through. It's just that this character has been so associated with Nicole Maines that anyone, any other delegation than the white delegation wouldn't allow for her to be cast in that role.
I certainly hope that that's all it is.
So from Dreamer, we move to what some might say is the opposite of Dreamer, and that would be Hank McCoy, my old nemesis, Hank McCoy. It feels right that he was drafted by the white delegation off of the Dynasty roster. Hopefully he finds his way back to the Dynasty roster. It's really hard to imagine. I mean, it's not that hard to imagine Hank McCoy as not a white guy, but let's face it, if he's anything other than white, he's a sellout, because that's what Hank McCoy means to me. he will sell his people out because he is a self-hating mutant.
Yeah.
Very intelligent. Not going to knock him on that front. Has done great things on the science front, but he likes to use the science to try to erase his mutantness. And that strikes me as the kind of person that would definitely be into race play. Can you save us from the Hank McCoy slander, or would you like to participate in it?
Look, I feel like it is very wow. You put me in a difficult situation. No, because I don't it was much easier to enjoy him as a character. First of all, when you see him in the animated series, because you don't get all of that chicanery with him trying to undo his mutant powers. But also when you see him in the Avengers, right? Because that's where he actually seems to feel like the same thing that I had my complaint about Vance Astrovic is very similar to his. It's like you're not really you don't really seem to get the mutant struggle, like not really, like you sort of give me the impression that you're one of the you're trying to be one of the good ones.
Right.
And so that sort of allowed me to enjoy them more on the Avengers team, because they're not a team that really addresses mutant racial ethnic genetic stuff at all. Like they don't get into it, so you get to just have like, oh yeah, cool adventures. But then when you actually see them alongside other mutants, it's like you kind of, you're like, I don't want to be on the team just because I'm a mutant. I'm I'm more than just a mutant. I'm a person too. It's like we know that but you sort of have this way of how you view things. And then on top of that, Hank McCoy is afflicted with the Marvel scientist curse, which is that he's like, yes, he's a super genius, but he is going to inevitably have a descent into like this ethical moral quandary of like,
mad science,
right?
Science for
Can
science sake.
can you be a Marvel scientist if you do not dabble into the darkest parts of mad science? Like that's just, you just can't. Not really. Like you can't. I'll put it this way: you can do it, but you can't become a popular character and still keep your good name. You cannot become a popular Marvel scientist unscathed. Period. There is not a single one that is like, Moon Girl. But like if she gets too popular, oh boy, they're gonna have her suddenly like
Yeah,
trying
look,
to.
no, here's the thing. Moon Girl is currently, I don't know, she's probably about 14 now. You know, when she hits like college age, she's gonna go through a whole mad scientist phase.
Right,
It's
right.
coming for you.
It's coming for her. It's sneaking up on her. Like she cannot go through and be a scientist and be unfazed. Even little Valeria Richards is like, "Yep, my godfather is Doctor Doom. We're sure going for it." So you know, they that
Look,
is something that
listen, I'm calling it now. Season 3 of the Moon Girl animated series. We're gonna meet either future Moon Girl or alternate universe Moon Girl.
right,
Who is
dystopian,
who's
evil
evil.
future moon girl. I mean, it's inevitable. So yes, Hank McCoy very much is like he is bouncing beast, you know, over on the Avenger side. But when you actually look into his mutant feelings, his feelings about himself as a mutant and about mutant kind, sort of overall, it is disturbing, and you kind of feel like,
And
mm,
that's kind of why I like him as a white guy more so than a person of color, because there's a little bit of a tinge of, you know, if I didn't look like a big blue fur ball,
yes,
I'd
yes.
be able to like
I'd be
really
able to
get it popping.
smother myself in some of that privilege. Taste some of that sweet, sweet Caucasian privilege.
It's right there for the taking. I'm
Right. Because
right
well,
there.
I certainly have the intellect for it. I have the pedigree. I've trained under Professor Xavier. I have the pedigree. If only
If
for not
only,
having this accursed blue fur.
or
If
even
only I
before
didn't look
that.
like if only I didn't look like one of these monkeys. Like, yeah,
I curse my bestial nature.
that is absolutely Hank McCoy. He very much is you know, constantly quoting Shakespeare and Nietzsche and all these other philosophical people, and he wants you to know he's
Oh,
very intelligent. That's He's
oh,
not letting you forget that.
we got a note from Carlos in the chat. Shout out to Carlos. Apparently there was spoilers for Moon Girl season 2. There was an evil alt Moon Girl in this season, so we're right there. So it comes for us all. Evil mad science comes for us all.
Oh,
Um,
that's too funny.
but yes, so 66.6% approval rating for white Hank McCoy, which is still too low. 33.
66.6. That sounds about accurate.
So yes, White Devil Beast, the
the
mark
the the
of
mark
said
of
beast.
beast. You're right, exactly.
uh, yeah, so yeah, we'll leave it there. The 6.6% marked for the beast. Moving from the beast to, I can't make a good transition here. Kendra Saunders, Hawk Girl, for the multiracial delegation. I would presume this multiracial would be Afro Latina. But yeah, I mean, look, we've talked about her before. I think that uh, I know she's going to be played by a Latina actress, but a non-Afro Latina actress. For me personally, it's hard to imagine uh, her not being black. Um, Kendra Saunders is very black coded, even if we acknowledge. I mean, in the comics, I believe she's Cuban,
Mhm.
um, and there are, of course, Afro Latinas who are Cuban. So for me, it works. For me, it works. She can embrace her African American, or or black, if you were, heritage, while also embracing her Latina heritage, and that's what the multiracial delegation was there for.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
both.
They are
Uh,
the skeleton key. Exactly.
exactly. So it works for me. What about you?
Yeah, I like it because I mean we had the Black Hawk Man, and then to have, I mean, obviously they're not the soulmates, but still having that family be like sort of that hero family be uh fly like birds, that it works. I like it.
Yeah. So the people somewhat disagree. 60% approval rating, 40% strongly approve, 20% somewhat approve, 20% somewhat disapprove, and 20% racist.
I mean, and I still feel like the somewhat disapprovers are like, but what about Hot Girl from the animated show? Even though that's not even the same
Yeah, that's not
character.
Kendra Saunders.
but
Oh, you know
but
what it is?
but
Oh, I just remembered. Didn't the actress who played Hawk Girl in the Arrowverse, wasn't she like trying to run away from her blackness? Wasn't that a thing that she was doing?
but I do know that there are still a very unfortunate number of folks over on the socials who do not know that Sierra and Kendra are not the same character. Like there's a lot of folks who think that Hawk Girl is Hawk Girl no matter which girl is wearing the hawk. Like she just is Hawk Girl. So they a lot of them I'm sure are like, black, what do you mean? So yeah, that's probably where that's coming from.
Fair point. This character is a fairly new character, and I've been reading the Gods book on Marvel. Have you been reading this book?
Yeah.
Oh, that's well.
I
This is a character
yes,
who's a little
I
bit of an
yeah.
this character is a little bit of an enigma. Akio Maki, one of the co-leads of the Gods book. It's a defensive pick. She's Asian in the book, and she's been drafted by the East Southeast Asian delegation. For me, that should be a easy 100% approval rating. But
Mhm.
our listeners being what they are, 83.3% strongly approve. Somebody's out there going, no.
I don't have much to say on her. I've read the story and it is interesting. I won't say that I'm locked in, but it's interesting.
Yeah,
And
I'm not
yeah,
fully locked in, but I'm finding the story interesting. I just don't
yeah,
feel like I need to read it as soon as the issues drop.
yeah.
From there, we move to the Jewish delegation and our girl Ilyana Rasputin, who I know you don't like. Uh, Magic. She's been drafted by the Jewish delegation before. Obviously, there are Jewish Russians.
Mhm.
Um, to the extent that she and Kitty Pride are kind of besties, maybe more. Them being both Jewish would just be another thing that they would have in common. Um, I don't have any reason to object to Jewish magic. What about you?
It works for me as long as she. I mean, there may come a time in a future draft where we get to see Black Girl Magic, but for now, I'm as long as she's not with us, I'm cool.
Okay. So yeah, 85.6, sorry, 85.7% approval rating for Jewish Magic, 71.4, 14.3 is the breakdown for the approvals, and 14.3% anti-Semitic. Moving on from Magic to Mystique, uh, two strippers. Um,
You're
but
right.
and yes, that's your girl, Black Mystique.
Yes,
Talk
yeah,
about it.
yeah. I mean, I first of all, like it comes from just the fact of who I wanted to actually play the role. Like I
Okay.
genuinely, if it in the MCU, I'm like, yes, get her please, because she just has it. Like I am not somebody who typically uses this vernacular, but if anybody has it, she has the riz. So like dang it, I forgot her name. I'm so bad with actors' names, but the actor who I saw, I remember her from American Horror Story. I have
Mhm.
yet to watch Pose. I'll get to it, but I have yet to watch that. But I have watched American Horror Story, and she makes such a compelling sort of character in that she's not like this one-dimensional villain. Like, I mean, both times she was in the show, she was in the show multiple times, but both times she's in the show, she's like just very elegant and sort of cold, and how she sort of carries out her villainous plots or whatever is just so like it is very charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
And it really worked for me that I'm like, somebody get her that little red-haired bob and the little white dress. Like, just, yes, put her in. She needs to do it. That's just, it worked.
I feel you there. I mean, I've been saying for a few years now that my fan cast for Mystique would be Tandy Wayne Newton,
Hmm.
who also brings, in my mind, a similar amount of, grace and gravitas, but toughness as
Yeah.
well. I think that one of the, we in our earliest stages of sort of mainstream introduction to Mystique, we got Rebecca Romaine, who did
Hmm.
an admirable job of giving that character, um, an edge,
Yeah.
that she did a lot with a little in
Yeah.
terms of performance. And of course, Jennifer Lawrence, she brought a little star power to the role, but they, given what the arc for her was, she wasn't really allowed to be a boss in the same way that
Right.
that we kind of would like to see Mystique. And no shade to Jennifer Lawrence, but Jennifer
I
Lawrence
mean, a little
has
bit of shade.
become,
Just a little bit. Like,
yeah. I mean, she was good for up and coming Mystique, but not
hmm.
so good for Mystique and fully formed. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that sometimes Jennifer Lawrence doesn't feel fully formed as an actress.
Like,
So I personally would want an older actress, especially because one of the under uh, talked about aspects of Mystique is that she's not supposed to be young. You know,
yeah.
she's been around, she's been with us since the 1800s.
Yeah.
And I what I like about um, and let me know if you sort of agree. Oh man, I'm drawing a blank on the actress's name, um, who went to Paris to escape um, racism.
Mata
Um,
Hari.
no, no, no. She black American actress slash
Oh,
model.
oh man.
Um,
Um,
oh man, it's gonna bother me. Um, she was basically like the first black supermodel. Um, Give me a second to look this up because it's gonna bother me. Um, I want to say Justine Baker. Is that a name?
that
Um,
that sounds right, but I'm like terrible at history. That's gonna bug me.
Not maybe not Justine Baker. Um,
Josephine Baker.
Josephine Baker. There we go. Thank you. We came to it together. Yes. So I could see Mystique kind of being like Josephine Baker coded. Um, being able to sort of move in and out of different cultural circles,
Mm,
um, using her sort of shape shifting abilities, but having a level of sophistication that in Europe that wouldn't be afforded to her in America.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of my spin on Black Mystique. But I think I'm not as familiar with this actress that you chose for the fan cast. Give me a second to look at that. You know, give me a second to pull it up. Angelica Ross is the actress that you
Mm-hmm.
chose.
Yep.
And like I
Yep.
said, I'm not familiar with her work, but the pick itself was fairly popular, 77.8% approval rating for Black Mystique, 66.7 strongly approved, 11.1 somewhat approved, 11.1 somewhat disapprove, and 11.1% anti-Black. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but in general, I think that going back to what we were saying before about there not being too many prominent Black mutants, Mystique being one, especially as kind of Magneto's number 2 would be a nice
Mhm.
way to kind of put the two together.
Yeah, could be a lot of fun.
For sure. We're moving to a defensive pick. I know that our guy Carlos had to be convinced, kicking and screaming to make this pick, but ended up being one of his most popular picks. Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle, defensive pick for the Latinx delegation. There's not
Mhm.
really too much to say. This is a character that's extremely popular and extremely on the upswing. 100% approval rating in my book, and 100% approval rating in the eyes of the fans for Jaime Reyes, the Blue Beetle, staying
Yeah.
Latino. Anything
Yeah.
else to add?
Um, it works.
For sure does. Moving from a character that works kind of right out the box to a character that maybe you have to go a little bit outside the box, and that would be Arthur Curry, the Aquaman, and the Native American delegation. Part of why I think it could, well, I think it could work, but part of why some might think it couldn't work is that Aquaman is very Thor coded. Um, Not fully, but he's got the whole King Arthur thing going on. Uh,
Hmm.
he's not pulling the sword from a stone, but maybe he's pulling the trident from a stone. I'm not sure exactly. Maybe that's not his origin. but he's from but again, in all seriousness, I mean, obviously we've seen Jason Momoa bring perhaps maybe too much Riz to the role. Little bring it down a little notch. Um,
Look, if it has writers adding a little bit more spice to the comic version of the character, I'm here for it. I'm not mad.
yeah, that's right. I mean that's true. But obviously, Jason Momoa made it more feasible that this is a
Yeah,
character that doesn't
yes.
need to be viewed uh, primarily through the lens of whiteness. Um, Obviously, the Atlanteans, their own thing in terms of what we project onto them from a racial perspective.
Hmm.
They can, they're still out there to be racially drafted if you want, but the Atlanteans can kind of be pushed off to the side. So then it just becomes a matter of how do you imagine Thomas Curry to be, and
Yeah.
culture does he impart upon his son? In the movies, we got why the actor's name is escaping me right now, who played Thomas Curry. But yeah, I mean, obviously he did an admirable job as playing Jason Momoa's dad, and I can totally imagine a similar Native American actor. I don't know which nations would be in that part of the country,
Hmm.
but but I think it could work. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's not necessarily what you would at first glance say. Oh yeah, it
I
totally.
mean, to
Yeah,
to to be fair, Jason Momoa is Polynesian, and Amnesty Bay is like up in Rhode Island somewhere, I think. And
right.
like literally, it's like way up in northeastern United States, coastal,
Mhm.
and we that's not something that we would associate with that area of the country at all. So
Right.
definitely
Tamara
to
Morrison is the actor's name. I forgot. But like you
yeah.
said, yeah, yeah. There's not a huge Polynesian community in
Right.
Rhode
So to turn around and say instead that it was like a native population that was up in that area, it feels you could almost draw the line a little bit easier.
Well, and especially the fact, I mean, Thomas Curry just is basically a fisherman who lives in a lighthouse.
Hmm.
You know,
Yep.
he's not really coming from the community.
Right.
He doesn't he doesn't have a large big uh, segment of family, of extended family to
Right,
view.
exactly. And
So
he's not really expanded on as a character, honestly. Like, I
right,
mean, aside from his connection to Arthur, that's really kind of it.
right. Now, I I I I do think it's interesting. I think it's worth kind of asking, and maybe this is too close to where we're about to go next. How would Arthur Curry, Aquaman, how would his heritage of being Native American, how would that inform how he would lead Atlantis? Would that make him a different kind of ruler than perhaps someone of a different ethnic background and different history with the relationship between his people and colonialists and or um, empires. He's basically
Mm,
inheriting an
He,
empire
he
in
might be a tad more sympathetic to the Atlanteans, maybe. I mean, having their natural environment destroyed, like he might be a little bit more. But I mean, he's always sympathetic to them anyway, so I don't think it would be drastically different, honestly.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Um, but it's only natural that we transition from one aqua-based Native American character to another aqua-based Native American character in Namor, for the Native American delegation. And I mean, all the work's basically been done for us in Black Panther Wakanda Forever.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Like we saw it. We actually saw it on our screen. We saw what it means to be uh, take to the seas and build a kingdom uh, to protect yourself from the colonizers and not want
And
to
and
have.
the funny thing about that is, um, the way that they did it is really kind of the only way that you can sort of make the case for a native Namor. Like, if you have,
You're gonna have to
did you?
repeat yourself. You
I
lost
know
you
this
again.
phone didn't cut me off again. Okay, okay,
Oh, you're
all right.
back.
So, okay, so if you have
Namor
Namor, that
McKenzie.
is right. If you have Namor McKenzie, who is the son of the human, whoever, the human sailor and the Atlantean queen, then you have to sort of square the circle more. But if you have the hundreds of year old native Namor, who, his people like magically became adapted to the ocean, then that's like, okay, I've been fully ingrained, enmeshed in the native culture. I don't have to try to be like the man of two worlds. I
Hmm.
know fully what this culture is like, and I've spent my whole entire life caring about and defending them.
Right. And taking it a step further, having been driven from the land to the water and building a kingdom in the water would,
Hmm.
by almost definitionally, make him wary of the people on the land.
Yes,
I've seen your works. I've
he
seen what
he
you
he
do.
is like a lot of people like to compare him to to Aquaman just because he's an aquatic character, but his personality is far more akin to Orm, to
Mhm.
Ocean Master. He's far more akin to him. He's like, no, I've seen what the surface world does. And I think that they if they overstep their bounds, they're gonna, I'm a force of nature. They're not gonna, trifle me. So he's far more that than he's ever been Arthur. And so, you have to have sort of that righteous anger, in terms of like, very difficult for him to sort of see the colonizers as sympathetic. Like, it can't be that I grew up among them and like, like, no, I see it purely for what it is. They're despoiling the environment, and they're, and in so doing, they're also harming my people, my culture.
Mhm. As they've done before.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think that I was never a huge Namor fan. I mean, I thought he was okay, and obviously people love the fact that he was positioned as this sort of romantic rival for Sue Storm in the Fantastic Four. But
Yeah,
and of course, as a different kind of king, you know, to be the counterpart or the foil for T'Challa. But I honestly think, I mean, that's one thing that we did sort of lose
yeah,
in not having T'Challa in Wakanda Forever, is the idea that they're kind of doing the same thing, protecting their kingdoms from the outside world,
yep,
and just one has actually seen what the colonizers are capable of, and
right.
it makes them a little bit more on edge and more willing to go to dark places to protect. He's almost like a combination of Killmonger and T'Challa. How
Hmm.
Killmonger was imagined in the MCU. Um, so I think that this version of Namor, as he is in the
Right.
MCU, is a lot more compelling, and I think that this hopefully will see them try as best as they can to incorporate into the comic book version of Namor, and I think it adds a lot to the character. I think that from the Native American delegation, I think it's a fine pick, and I've got no reason to object to it.
I think it's very well done, Pet.
Yeah. So that's so from an approval perspective, it only got 75% approval rating. 58.3 strongly approved, 16.7 somewhat approved, 16.7 somewhat disapprove, and 18.3% colonizer. Let's be honest. If you don't like this version of Namor, I don't know. I'm looking at you sideways. But moving on from Namor to our friends at the Latinx delegation, another pick that we had to force them to take, and another one of their super popular picks, and that is Latino Moon Knight, Mark Spector, he of the Egyptian god Khonshu and his alternate uh, personalities. Um, Obviously, we've seen that also put into practice through the Moon Knight MCU series.
Hmm.
There's, you know, obviously um, there are uh, Latinos who are Jewish. So, to the extent that having him be reimagined as Latino could potentially undercut that, I don't think it has to undercut it too much, particularly because, I mean, I think we talked about this before, but even though Mark Spector is Jewish, and even though his father was a rabbi, Mark himself doesn't really live um, according to Jewish traditions, and that is a source of kind of contention in in his family. So, him being, not necessarily, sort of turning his back on the faith somewhat. Um, I think it works. I don't think it diminishes. I don't think it diminishes the character. But that's me personally, as someone who's not Jewish. But as far as my readings of the character over the years in different contexts, and my current readings of the current character, I think that there's a way to, particularly given his his alters, this potentially could be an argument for him being in the multiracial delegation. The alters. You know what I mean? That his alters could each have, show represent a different part of his identity. But I think that could still play out in Latinx heritage. What do you think? Are you there? Hmm. Well, hopefully you can weigh in when your phone cooperates. But
Well,
if not,
personally, I don't know about this Latino Moon Knight. I mean, who would they cast? Oscar Isaac or somebody? I don't know. I don't know if I can see that. Doesn't quite fit the mold, you know. Uh, but I mean, yes, basically. I mean, aside from the fact that there are people who are like, he's his Jewishness is very much in question as an actor. I personally, other than that, consideration, which it's obviously a valid consideration, but other than that, I do actually like him in the role, and it's a good fit. Like I just can't,
Yeah,
if they found somebody better, obviously I'll be like, go for it. But what we have is actually pretty good. So
yeah. And this still happens to arrive at a time where Moon Knight is experiencing the aforementioned Jed McKay writing renaissance
yep,
for the character. Now he does have the unfortunate uh, predicament of being deceased right now,
yeah,
but
details. It's fine.
yeah. I mean, it being Easter, it's not
Right.
like there aren't Jewish people that come back to life. I mean, it can happen.
Exactly.
Jesus,
Right.
you know, it, so we await the rising of the Moon Knight. But the people are more than likely on the side right now. 80.9% approval rating for Latino Moon Knight, 71.4 strongly approved, 9.5 somewhat approved, 14.3 somewhat disapproved, and 4.8% racist. But that's Latino Moon Knight. We move from Latino Moon Knight to character we talked about a little earlier, Moon Girl, black, staying black, black girl
Right.
magic, sing the song in your head. Um, I mean, go ahead and pitch it. You don't really have to say that much, but go ahead and
I
explain
mean,
why it's so girl stir black.
I feel like you sort of diminish the character by making her anything other than black, because we get sort like we already get, like, I don't know, it's always treated as an anomaly to see black people be smart. And then when you see them be smart, at the same time, you also see that, the question is automatically posed as, well, what is their proximity to blackness? Like, are they one of those? or
Mm-hmm.
or are we like able to sort of root for them? Like, they don't really get, you almost sort of have to pick between whether or not you want to acknowledge the blackness of the character or whether you want them to be popular. And for her to be black and be starring in her own show, um, her comic, I don't know how well it sold. I'm assuming it sold pretty well if they optioned her for a show. But you know, um, she comes from this community of characters, the Inhumans, that did not have a whole lot going for them in terms of fan goodwill, managed to survive that. And now she's on her second season of this show where she's not like part of an ensemble cast. She is the main star.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like taking that away would really suck. Just, I don't really know how
No,
to
I
say it.
agree, and I think that the show has. I mean, full confession, I didn't read the entirety of her run in the comics. I dibbed and dabbed, and
I mean,
it felt
look,
like it was
she,
for a younger audience.
right. She's had the one that was by, I believe it was Amy Reeder, and then she had another one that was shorter lived, by a black writer. I forget what the name was, but um I'm just happy basically that she's persisting,
Hmm.
and they haven't given up. Like, she's not a Miles Morales, right? She's not
Yeah.
a Miles Morales, she's not a Kamala Khan, but
But I
she's
do think that
persisting.
the show has
Uh-huh.
done a lot for her in terms of, I can definitely see, if it hasn't happened. Well, it hasn't happened already, but I can definitely see if they do relaunch her comic,
Mhm.
bringing in a lot of her extended family to play bigger roles in the book, the way that they've played a bigger role in the comic. I mean,
Right.
in the show.
Right.
And I think that
Giving her
that's
right, giving her that you know, allowing us to see her family and her culture and not just be strictly about the science and the superheroing, it went a long way. At least for me it did.
exactly. And yeah, and again, doing that fleshes out the character, gives the character more dimensions, and
Mhm.
creates that kind of cultural specificity that it's not just paying lip service to the idea of black girl magic. It's actually embodying it and giving it life. And and yeah, again, for that reason, um, strongly entrenched in the black, in the black delegation, and it's a
Mhm.
very fun pick for me. 90%, 90.9% approval rating for the people, which is, considering Twitter, pretty damn good. With 9.1 somewhat disapproving. So, whoever you are out there not disapproving Elon, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah, that's the ginger side people. That's like, well, how would you like it if we made Moon Girl white? Like
I
that's
mean, they should take. Oh, you did it. You did it. You helped us with the segue from Black Girl Magic to Jewish Girl Magic. Zatanna for the Jewish delegation. I mean, obviously, I know that in the canon, she's supposed to be of Greek uh, background, but I mean, you got a little
I
wiggle room
mean,
there.
Zatanna is she is spicy white. Like she's got I think she's got like some Greek, some Italian, some Romani up in there. Like she got a couple of European goings on going on
Yeah,
in her bloodline. So
yeah. As long as she's not like Aryan, as long as she's
right.
not Aryan. Nazi goddess. Like we're good. We're good on Zatanna. So yeah, there's not a lot to say beyond that. I mean, she's a good character, and
Hmm.
not doesn't appear well. I feel like whenever she does appear, people like it. But it's been a while since she had her own book. They were working on the movie, probably that was I think pre James Gunn regime, so we don't know what their
She
plans are.
she had Zatanna and the Ripper on Webtoon, but
Yes.
I have yet to read that, so I have no idea whether it was like something
Well,
I
I
would
read
have.
it. It was a fun book. I mean, it involved time travel, so it wasn't
Uh,
sort of set in the main universe. But yeah, I mean, there was yeah, I don't want to spoil it for you, but some of her characters popped in.
mm,
Some magic based characters popped in on it. It was a fun book.
okay.
But yeah, I mean, long term, she's been a big player in Justice League Dark. They haven't quite found a spot for her in the main Big Boy Justice League, um, but like I said, she's a popular character. She's probably going to remain popular, and I will look forward to seeing her somewhere in some kind of live action soon. I'm sure.
Mm,
I think wasn't she in Smallville even?
yes,
Yeah, so she's got a
for
history of
better or worse.
yeah. But I'm just saying the fact that she's got a history of showing up
Hmm.
in in all of the series and all of the mediums. I'm surprised she hasn't been in a video game, honestly. Um, but yeah, 77.8% approval rating for Jewish Zatanna, 55.6 strongly approve, 22.2 somewhat approve, and 22.2 strongly disapprove of Jewish Zatanna. Wow, that is some
That
hardcore.
that that can't be anything other than anti-Semitism. Because how do you disapprove of Zatanna? Like
Yeah,
it's Zatanna,
I don't even know how to say anti-Semitism backwards, but that's
right?
that's the spell right there. Um, moving from yeah, I'm getting really bad with transitions tonight. Sorry, guys. From magic to goblins, sure. Um, Green Goblin #2, Harry Osborn. Or as I like to say, George W. Osborne. Can't quite live up to his daddy's memory. Um, he's out there. He's fine. We put up with him. Friends with Peter, goes supervillain, doesn't live up to his dad. We feel bad for him. Lather, rinse, repeat. But yeah, so the East Southeast Asian delegation, they drafted him. They had a fan cast. I'm trying to remember. It was Charles Melton was the fan cast. I feel like they drafted him as a vehicle for drafting Charles Melton. Because he could definitely play the version of Harry Osborn that we got in the Raimi movies.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you agree?
I think so. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I see him in the, as the Harry, the sort of sad Harry from the comics. Um,
Yeah, not like if I was to like expect like what we were gonna get for Tom Holland if he were to meet his own Harry Osborn, nah, not really.
exactly. And tying it back to what we were saying, I mean, obviously, racial draft being what it is, you can't always line up fathers and sons, but if Norman is black coded or person of color coded, Harry is like person of color coded, but like much more self-hating.
Yeah, yeah.
More pathos. He definitely listens to Drake, if we're being honest. Harry Osborn. It's just got all Drake on the playlist. But yes, 50% approval rating for Harry Osborn, which even Harry Osborn might say is about right. Um, we will move on from Harry to the other side of the pendulum, and that would be Victor Von Doom, who has no shortage of ego. Victor Von Doom, multiracial Victor. I mean, he's Romani, and that's a multiracial background on its own. So
Mhm.
it's basically a defensive pick. I know a lot of people think that Romani means white, but no, not in fact. In fact, not the case.
Yeah, like
So even
that's
though
way off base. Yeah.
even though a lot of people just reflexively draft the whitest of the white people to uh fan cast the
Well,
whitest of the white people.
because they're over in Europe, so people are like, "Oh, you mean like," and then they just find the whitest possible person.
Yeah, it's frustrating because especially because Doom is 90% of the time he's under a mask anyway. So
Right.
it's like you really needed to know. You really need to know that there's a white man under there.
No, yeah,
If
like yeah,
anything,
he has a mask, but it's a white guy under the mask. Then
yeah. I mean, I feel like if anything, that's an argument for him not being, chalky white. That it's like these people just think that I'm a white man under here.
yeah, right, exactly.
So I'm for it. For some reason, the poll is not loading. The approval poll. I'll give it another shot before I.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Racial drag. Come on, phone.
yeah. Don't worry about it. I'll pull it up on my phone. But Doom.
Okay, here we go. It says 60% approval rating,
Okay, so
and then
60%.
60% strongly approve, and then 40% somewhat disapprove.
Thank you. So
Yeah,
disappointing, but I get it. A lot of people think of Doctor Doom as just a white man, even though he's not. He's not. But anyway, moving to the white delegation, and this is a character that could have been having a moment. Could have been having a moment. That character being Julia Carpenter, formerly Spider Woman, currently Madam Web. And if you forgot Madam Web, you wouldn't be the first person. But yeah, she was in a movie. She was in a movie just a little over a month ago. Um, did you see Madam Web?
I did. It was sure something. it
Yeah,
I, I mean, like
it
the
was a
funny
movie.
part is,
It was a
I
movie.
I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it in the same way that I enjoyed 2004 Catwoman, right? Like
Mhm.
it's bad. It is objectively bad. It's objectively bad, like by multiple scales, but I don't care. I enjoy it. I stand. I really do.
See, I kind of feel like I didn't. It didn't get me to the point where I thought it was bad. It just got me to the point where I was like, I didn't feel like they put anything into it. You know, it felt like a
Like
movie that was like a TV movie.
right, right. Like I mean the cuz the only my biggest complaint is that you you tone down a lot of the superhumanness of it. Like that was my main thing that frustrated me because for us to see that the women are suited up and it's like, okay, well, I figured that they might probably not get a whole lot of time, but I'm like, my God, they got at the
Mhm.
very end we saw them, and it was like, that to me, I feel like if you are hearing about a spider based movie, you're expecting some athletic web slinging stuff to be happening, right? Like if you got any
Yeah,
spider, I don't care if it's Spider Woman, Spider Girl, Spider Punk, whoever you're talking about, it's going to be like a high flying web swinging wall crawling thing. And it was essentially like True Calling or Final Destination or something. It was not
yeah,
what you would have expected from a superhero movie at all, but especially not one that is affiliated with the Spider-Man mythos.
yeah. I called it the pilot of a CW show. I feel like that and the pilot of a CW show that I would probably watch. You know, but
Right.
uh, not necessarily for the cinema, if you will.
I would be on the sidelines championing it after it got canceled from its first season. But the potential, like, yeah, so that I mean, I enjoyed it. I did, I really did. But
But
I'm
from
like,
a from a
yeah,
value perspective, obviously she's already white in the comics, so it's not
yeah,
they're not stretching it there. Julia Carpenter is, I believe, she's going to be playing a prominent role in the Spider Society book
right,
that's coming.
exactly. And that point also being made, the fact that yes, Madam Web, quote unquote, was drafted, but it was Julia Carpenter as opposed to Cassandra Webb, who currently is dead in the comics.
Right. Um, so, the combination of her being played by Sydney Sweeney in the movie,
Mhm.
who people really like Sydney Sweeney for
I
some
approve.
um, and yeah, and Julia Carpenter's having a moment of the Madam Web characters.
Mhm.
Um, she might be the one that's going to have the most of a bit of a bounce, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, because Cassandra's dead. Um, Maddie Franklin, I have not seen neither hide nor hair of her in a minute.
Yep,
And dang it,
Anya.
Anya Corazon, she's not doing a whole lot. Like she's doing some, but not a whole lot.
Right. Yeah, I think she's going to be in the Spider Society book too. So
Right,
there's hope
right,
for
right.
her.
Yeah.
And there was a version of Anya in the Spider Verse, but
But
it was a blink and you miss it type of
right,
situation.
and that
Um,
that Anya, they even for that potential, they haven't cemented that into anything yet. So it is still very much we're just speculating that she's gonna,
right.
how she's gonna show up. So
But so yeah, but she would be the number two behind
hmm
Julia. But yeah,
yeah.
Julia is still, notwithstanding Madam Web not really doing anything, there it seems like Marvel still is committed to having a Madam Web and having that Madam Web be Julia Carpenter. So good
hmm
pick for the White Delegation. Approval wise, 70.5 approval. No, sorry, 71.5. 42.9 strongly approved, 28.6 somewhat approved, 14.3 somewhat disapprove, and 14.3 strongly disapprove of Still White, Madam Web.
And
Julia.
we just have no choice but to assume that the strongly disapproves are those of us who saw the Madam Web movie.
Fair point. Fair point. Speaking of movies that were perhaps mixed received, Black Adam was the next pick from the Swanamania delegation. I want to talk about a character that could have gone down a number of divergent paths. I would imagine if Black Adam had made $1 billion in the box office, there'd be a Black Adam book right now. But
Had it actually deserved $1 billion box office, good googly moogly. Like, it's crazy because that movie, for all of the complaints that people have about the movie, Black Adam was literally the least compelling part of his own movie. Like, that's sad. It sucks. It really does.
yeah, I mean, I I'm mixed on the character. I don't dislike the character. I don't love the character, but I think that,
Yeah.
I think that there's a place for Black Adam in the
Hmm.
DC universe, particularly, given that there are so few characters of Swana Mena descent,
Right.
in comics in general, but particularly in DC. So I want to see him. I want to see him prosper. I did actually like the recent run. Was it Christopher Priest who wrote, I
Hmm.
believe?
Yeah.
I like the recent run. It just so happens that I don't think the run of him in the Justice League worked particularly well. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to see him bounce back. But I'm sure there's a little bit of a sense that DC put a lot of energy into pushing the character and
Hmm.
didn't feel like it paid off. So they're taking a breather before they bring him back. And that's
Yeah, I
unfortunate.
mean, he's shown up in the recent Shazam comics, but it was definitely not like, it wasn't even, because it was funny because trying to think when the last time I saw Black Adam actually had like a sort of a big role. Yes, of course he had his solo, which was 12 issues, but I'm trying to think. I think it was like that last little bit. Dang it, was it Future State? I don't know if it was Future State. It was like around that little parcel of time when like Teen Titans Academy was out, and it was
Yeah.
like they were hinting that Billy Batson was like in hell. He was like so pure, and he had let himself sort of hold together it was a whole lot of going on. It was like they were doing a whole lot of crap, and it was like it was just not good. But it was like in the midst of that, they also had this old but young version of Black Adam that came. It was very weird. Like they had a lot. Like I don't even know how that got approved in editorial for them to try to like make that happen. But that was like the last time I saw him before he showed up again in this Shazam run that Mark Waid is currently working on. And in this current run, they don't give you any hint that he's going to have any larger role. He's just like one of the multiple things that Billy has to sort of juggle in his superheroing.
Mhm. Well, like I said, I think that the fact that the movie uh, didn't really hit like they wanted has
Mhm.
not only, I wouldn't say it hurt the character, but it definitely affected the character's ascent,
Yeah,
and it's affected the approval rating because it's only 50% approval rating for North African Black Adam to remain North African Black Adam, and that's just an indication that people just don't like the character like they used to.
yeah.
Um, but we will uh, move to another character that this one's a little more controversial. I mean, this is John Constantine, who was played by Keanu Reeves way back when, but since then has kind of got a different kind of push under a different kind of actor. But the Polynesian delegation had drafted him in a previous season as a dynasty pick, so cashed in on that dynasty. John
Yeah.
Constantine is a little bit of a constant. He gets his runs. He's got a current book. He shows up in other people's stuff. He's their guy. He's their Doctor Strange, so to speak.
Oh,
In the
sorry.
sense of
I gotta correct you. Constantine.
mm,
It just came to me. I was like, wait, they said, yeah, Constantine. Yeah.
yeah. So I think, yeah, I know you're right. You're right. I mean, obviously, there are many, 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 many hours of shows where it's pronounced the other way. But sure,
Yeah.
Constantine. Um, but obviously, this is less a move, I think, to solidify uh, cultural heritage of him being Polynesian, because it's really important to Constantine or Constantine's character that he be from London and be dirty London, the
Yeah.
most dirty. Or is it, wait, not
Right.
London. Wait, not London. Isn't it Liverpool?
Liverpool, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. No, listen, Liverpoolians feel some kind of way on not wanting to be compared to the other British people. So yes, shout out to Liverpool. Um, but obviously there can be people of Polynesian descent in Liverpool, and they can, as long as they've got the accent, it can work. So to that end, I guess I could say that I do approve, albeit somewhat. But the
Right.
people,
Exactly.
the people, wait for it to load, are largely on my side, given that the approval rating is 71.4%, and all 71.4% is somewhat approved. Um, but 14.3 somewhat disapprove, and 14.3 strongly disapprove of Polynesian Constantine. And that
Hmm.
brings us to the 10th and final pick of the 10th round of the racial draft. Sadly, I have to say it's my least favorite pick of the round, and that's our friends in the South Asian delegation who drafted Guy Gardner.
Ugh.
Um, I'm not really sure what I can say to defend this pick, because that if there was ever a Green Lantern that was white coated, it would be that guy. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how to square the circle. What do you think, Randy?
Look, I drafted him once purely out of spite, and that's like the best case that I could possibly make for him not to be a white guy. Other than that, yeah, it's very Caucasian.
Yeah. So tough look for our guy. Tough look. 50%. Yeah, 50% approval rating, which is higher than I expected. 37.5 strongly approve, 12.5 somewhat approve,
Yeah,
and
the
12.5.
30 something percent. That's about the same folks who voted for Trump. Yeah, that
Oh,
sounds about right.
and
It's yeah.
yeah. And so very polarized. 37.5 strongly approve and 37.5 strongly disapprove of South Asian Guy Gardner.
And those are probably just people who just disapprove generally of Guy Gardner as a character. Like I have a hard time believing that somebody was like, yeah, Guy Gardner, except for 30%.
So we're going to take a quick break and just rehydrate, and we'll be back in just a moment after our quick break and go through the final two rounds of the racial draft.